Hello everyone, this is Bradley. Today's tutorial covers this liquid metal emerge effect. It was inspired by a Cinema 4D tutorial, which itself was inspired by another wonderful motion artist on Instagram. Before we really start, I want to discuss some behind-the-scene problem solving. Otherwise, this video would be over in seconds with just a few clicks. First, I want to go over some relatively simple approaches. In many ads, you can see a bottle growing in one direction. This can be done with a simple directional falloff and a vector noise to skew the evaluation slightly, giving the border a rougher look. I've talked about directional falloff and the proximity falloff in my preset tutorials. In my opinion, these are the two most common falloffs in motion graphics. Here you can see that without a vector noise, the evaluation is basically flat. With it, the edge becomes rougher. You can make the effect more prominent by turning the factor up to 100%. However, due to the way we evaluate the falloff, you may sometimes get irregular appearing and disappearing speed. It can also look like separate islands popping out from nowhere. Since we are evaluating position in 3D space, increasing the noise texture frequency adds more detail, but also creates more isolated islands. That's why if you want to keep the shape as one large mass, you should use a lower frequency and an even lower factor. Anyway, this is still a simple and quick method that I would recommend trying first. However, this liquid metal emerge animation is different. Here I've prepared a comparison to better demonstrate the differences. The top one is our target, mimicking the reference from other software. And the bottom one is done using a directional falloff. If you compare the falloff propagation, directional falloff clearly moves from one direction to another, even if you add some noise to the appearing edge. Our ideal result, however, should behave more like an infection. It doesn't simply propagate left to right. It also spreads perpendicular to the mean direction and crosses toward the center. This brings us to the paint wave solver, which I also discussed a while ago. It's basically the node-based version of our dynamic painting simulation that comes with Blender. And integrating it into geometry nodes allows for more flexibility and control within Blender's most advanced procedural system. Before I go further, I want to emphasize that if you are working with simple models and only need one directional propagation, then a directional falloff is probably all you need. Paint wave solver is a simulation, so you will need to keep baking your animation after changing parameters. That can make your life unnecessarily difficult when a directional falloff can work in real time. Ideally, paint wave solver should be used in this case because we need propagation in more than one direction. However, there was a problem with my implementation when it came to keeping a rough border. As I mentioned in the preset tutorial, the spread is mostly driven by the blur attribute node each frame. This node has quite a few limitations. In this particular case, even if you start with rough edges, as you keep blurring the border for propagation, the border gets averaged over time and eventually becomes a smooth circular shape. I thought about lowering the blur weight. If some areas had more blur weight and others had less, the spread might favor certain areas, creating a rougher edge. It's similar to what we did in the obstacle avoidance tutorial replicating Antagma's work. Unfortunately, the idea didn't work well in my opinion, so I had to look for other methods. In the end, I came up with a new spread mode that allows for a rougher border. The algorithm is inspired by Albin's work. Feel free to check out how he uses Blender nodes in professional-looking motion graphics projects. Unfortunately, this algorithm doesn't allow for wave propagation as good as the previous wave mode after the spread. In fact, the two algorithms are so different that they cannot be integrated. Here we have a direct comparison showing how two modes behave differently. The left is spread mode, and the right is wave mode. You can see that while spread mode is great for the initial spread, the later wave motion does not look very good, and the amplitude does not match well before and after the initial spread. If you want the later waves to be more obvious, you have to increase the amplitude, but that also exaggerates the displacement during the initial spread. Wave mode, on the other hand, maintains a better balance in its initial spread and later wave motion. The only issue is that it cannot preserve a roughened border very well. So they exist as two separate modes, and users need to choose the one that best suits their needs. In this tutorial, we will definitely use spread mode for our roughen edge. Now we are back to the actual tutorial starting from scratch. First, we need a model. I prepared one procedurally using nodes. I don't expect you to copy the node tree because it's a little bit complicated. If you're a monthly subscriber, you can download the tutorial file for free, which includes this model to start with if you like. It's important to note that the original geometry had separate parts, and I've also rematched them so the pieces are merged into a single connected mesh. This is important because we need connected geometry for blur attribute to propagate across. Other workarounds are much more complicated. Another reason is that we need a high level of subdivision, as we will discuss later. For most users, you can follow the tutorial using your own model or simply a torus. Once we have the model, I will create a new plane and add a node tree, then remove the group input. For demonstration purposes, I will bring both my object and the torus into this node tree. The rest is fairly simple. I will add a paint wave solver right away. I will use a proximity Falloff driven by a spherical empty object, placing it near the border so it just touches the surface to start the infection process. Then I will extend the timeline to around 250 frames so we have more frames to preview. Whenever you are working with simulations, you may also want to make sure your playback sync is set to play every frame. Now if we play the animation while watching how this Falloff changes, you will see the Falloff spread with roughened edges. It works well without needing to tweak many parameters. For convenience, I will go to the Simulation tab and bake part of it so we can scrub the timeline more easily. We mainly need to work with this Falloff. For example, we can use this white Falloff mask to separate the geometry. You can see that the infected white area is selected and shown in the viewport. To make the animation more interesting, I will enable wave displacement, which deforms the mesh based on the generated wave mask. If you change the inertia parameters, you will have to rebake the simulation. For this tutorial, I will just keep the default values. Keep in mind that the wave doesn't just move upwards, it also moves downwards. If you increase the displacement, you will better see this movement. When you join the geometry, some parts may end up buried under the original mesh. To fix this, I will reduce the displacement to a reasonable value and add another normal displacement to offset this layer further outwards. Now I will use a solidify node to add some thickness. I will also add a smooth position node at the end to reduce jagged edges. I will tweak some parameters to improve its volume look. This mostly completes the animation. We didn't spend lots of nodes because most heavy works are done using presets. There are several important notes about the simulation parameters. Tweaking parameters can be risky and exhausting because you need to keep playing the animation to preview and potentially deleting the cache and rebaking the cache. If you just want to change the border pattern, you can adjust the resistance seed and of course delete the cache and rebake the cache. I've provided a resistance preview in case you want to see how the seed and the frequency affect the results or use it creatively, but so far I haven't used that socket much myself. Next, I want to talk about the speed of propagation. As mentioned earlier, we are using blur attributes, and you can always see the names are matching those parameters for the spread. And we control spread using these two parameters. For demonstration purposes, I will use a grid to replace the model and make sure you remove the bake. If we play the animation, you find it takes about 40 frames to cover the whole grid. If I lower the weight by 10 times, it takes about 60 frames to complete. On the other hand, if we lower the iteration, it will also help slow down the propagation, but you may start to find the border pattern becomes quite straight. And if you lower the iteration to 1, you find that the influence of our resistance is basically non-existent. That's why I keep the default value 4 to ensure the resistance will be obvious in most of default situations. But this also means the amount of limit we can actually slow down the propagation. If you lower the weight too much, it will ultimately come to a moment where the propagation is becoming difficult. In that case, you can decrease the amplitude factor to lower the resistance, so things can propagate a little better while having lower speed. However, what's important here is actually a parameter outside these two controls, the amount of subdivision on our geometry. Right now, we have the grid vertices count about 100 times 100, and it takes about 40 frames to finish. If I only have 20 times 20, then it only takes about 15 frames. And obviously, if I have 250 times 250, at about 40 frames, we are only half of the way. This is the moment you need to rather increase the iterations so that it will speed up the spread. So these are the things you have to manage on your own, but it takes more time and more RAMs to bake your simulation cache. Anyway, so this is the solution how we slow down the spread for a torus. If it's running too fast, the subdivision can be more helpful than the spread parameters, as you see. Finally, let's go back to our complex model and finish the shader. Before I rebake the simulation, there is one issue about UVMap I want to address. Knowing that my mesh was procedurally created and I didn't put a UVMap onto it. Also, it has been through voxel remesh, so UVmaps will be destroyed anyway. While it's possible to UV unwrap in geometrynodes, you have to deal with the same, and it will be very slow for this amount of subdivision. I don't like to use it, so here I rather recommend duplicating the original geometry, apply the modifier, and we UV unwrap manually using the Smart UV project for simplicity. And it's done. Now we can go back to our animation node tree to use these new objects with a valid UV map and bake the animation. As we finish the baking, the second thing I want to do for shader is creating a mask from the wavefront. I've prepared a wavefront output, which is a thin line. I will use blur attributes to expand it, but the blurring reduces its intensity, so I will multiply it by a value to compensate. I'm doing this because I need a mask, so I store named attributes. I will call that f. Let's add set material, add material, and select it. In shader editor, first I want to make sure we have UVMap as you see. You can use it for the image texture or whatever. Then I will check the mask we added. We can use it to mix for emission color and tweak parameters as you wish. So that's it for this entire animation. It's not complicated at all, but there are workflow parameters you need to understand for your own specific needs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll probably see you next time. Bye bye.